Hello again, and welcome back, all 10 of you. It's me again, Dio, aka Christos Lux, aka Stone Man, aka Wielder of the Cold Fire. I have an exciting topic to cover today. I'm very excited. Can you tell? Perhaps you've heard of the Mandela effect. Perhaps you've experienced it. Perhaps you've done research on it. Was it Berenstain or Berenstain? That was me in 2015. It's Berenstain. It's always been Berenstain. I remember. Apparently not. Apparently it's always been Berenstain. It's enough to drive you mad, isn't it? It is. I've read occult books trying to find the truth, but I never read a book that explained the Mandela effect before reading Fundamentals of the Hyperborean Wisdom. So, that is what I'm going to cover today, straight from the text. So without further ado, this is from page 268. It's called The Terrible Secret of Maya. We are going to touch here on one of the most hermetic mysteries that exist, which is the one that refers to Maya, the illusion of the real. But such hermeticism does not obey this time, as in many well-known occult hoaxes, to the mere desire to veil a sacred symbol, i.e., to the intention of making esoteric the truth represented by the sacred symbol. What occurs in this case is that Maya is the word that designates a terrible secret, one of those ideas capable of upsetting the most equilibrated and rational mind. That is why the secret of Maya has been strictly veiled. And if here we decide to reveal it, for being necessary to explain the theory of the archimonic technique, we will do it after making a clear warning. We suggest to the reader, in effect, that, even if he has become aware of the secret of Maya, he should not dwell too much on this idea, for it can provoke unforeseeable and dire consequences, especially if the reader is imbued with the preceding text on the fundamentals of the Hyperborean wisdom. Only the awakened Virya has the means to operate without danger with the secret of Maya. The reader, in the meantime, can attempt to awaken from the great deception by adopting the luciferic graceful attitude that is described in the second part. By that path he will succeed, at last, in converting himself into an awakened Virya. Only then will he be able to dwell without danger in the terrible secret of Maya. Of course, we will analogically expose the secret of Maya, basing ourselves on the structural model developed in this work. The objective will be that the terrible idea will be induced by the analogical example. Let us begin then, without forgetting at any moment the strict analogical correspondences that exist between the microcosm and the macrocosm. When the cultural subject of the Passu thinks a system of the cultural structure, according to what has been seen, it can note it on any of the multiple planes of signification that intersect its XX extensive axis. Each one of these planes corresponds to the meaningful context of a language. A context within the XX thought system acquires conceptual significance. The concept of an XX system is thus the significance noted on the plane of a contextual language. On the other hand, the XX system can be thought by the cultural subject because it subsists in transcendent time. Well, let us now look at things from the point of view of the demiurge. whose consciousness, transcendent time, is isotropically diffused in every successive entity, except in those internal directions of immanent time. According to the Hermetic correspondence between macro and microcosm, the demiurge also has to perform an operation analogous to that of thinking a system. But what is a system for the demiurge? Answer: any culture or superstructure of cultural facts. Effectively, as will be explained in the second part and was already advanced in Article H of the section Functioning of the Passu's Cultural Structure, man's presence as a bidder of meaning transforms the designated entities into cultural objects, which are organized in the world, forming superstructures of cultural facts. In these superstructures, which subsist in transcendent time, man, Passu, or Lost Virya, is usually integrated as a structural element. This is because the body of the Lost Virya is only a potential microcosm subsisting in transcendent time. Leaving for later the detailed explanation of the superstructures, what is important at this point is to emphasize that they determine an exterior form denominated culture, which can be thought by the demiurge as a system. Establishing the corresponding analogies, the same properties that we attribute to the cultural subject apply here. The demiurge, first of all, is capable of noting the superstructure as a whole, or of carrying out a systematic reduction, going, for example, from a collection of cultural objects and a plurality of superstructured microcosms to the consideration of a single microcosm as a system. Moreover, given a determinate culture, the demiurge can note it in different spaces of signification, and codify it as many other contextual superlanguages. Naturally, at the level of consciousness of the demiurge, the planes of signification of the cultural structure are analogous to spaces of signification of the superstructures of cultural facts. Herein consists the secret of Maya, now revealed through the structural analogy. Every cultural entity in the universe, be it a cultural object, or a potential microcosm, or a superstructure that integrates them, simultaneously exists in uncountable macrocosmic spaces of signification, and, on each of these planes of existence, the cultural entity signifies a superconcept of the demiurge, i.e., its significance is determined by the contextual framework of a macrocosmic superlanguage. Surely at this point of the exposition, the reader's reason ought to refuse to admit the consequences that are inferred from the secret of Maya. However, it is too evident to deny. Whoever lives integrated into a culture perceives only a minimal aspect of reality. The socio-cultural world where life takes place is only the context of a superconcept of the demiurge. The house, the neighborhood, the city, the country, the continent, the planet, the solar system, the galaxy, the known universe, everything that surrounds us and that we believe to be a unique and stable world are, in truth, nothing more than aspects of the context of a superconcept together with uncountable similar superconcepts, i.e., together with uncountable contextual worlds in which we simultaneously exist. The Passu, and even the Lost Virya, perceive only one world of the many in which they simultaneously exist, the habitual one, in which they are stable only because they are integrated into rigid superstructures of external entities or cultures. The habitual one, in which they are stable only because they are integrated into rigid superstructures of external entities or cultures. That is why the Hyperborean wisdom denominates the reality of a habitual world as the Great Deception, because the daily context conceals and hides the plurivocity that the ontic existence develops in the multiple spaces of macrocosmic signification. A culture, or superstructure, is a system that can be noted by the demiurge in multiple spaces of signification. Each significant notation is a superconcept, i.e., an aspect, facet, profile, etc., of said culture. This means that between contiguous superconcepts that are not too oblique, only small differences will be noted. Considering, for example, the city of Buenos Aires as the context of a superconcept, we can suppose the existence of another contiguous superconcept with a Buenos Aires, in which the obelisk does not exist, or another without freeways. And if in that urban context we inhabit, we can also conceive a world in which our mother is a twin sister of a sculptor, or in which some of our loved ones do not exist, or have never existed, etc. This leads us to the following question. Is conscious transit between two contiguous superconcepts possible? In other words, could it occur that a lost Virya be displaced from his contextual world into a contiguous world, very similar, but with appreciable differences? Answer: yes. That is precisely the terrible possibility that faces the one who decides to purify his blood and undertake the path of return to the origin. The veil of Maya may then fall, and reality may become distorted at many points, as if the entire world conspired to plunge him into hallucination and insanity. And not only this, if the Virya has not adopted a convenient state of alertness, if he does not move in the right kairos and with the proper strategy, he could find himself transported to a highly oblique context, i.e., to a world of completely strange and unknown characteristics, where 1,000 unsuspected dangers would defeat his purpose of spiritual liberation. All this, which is nothing more than a reaction denominated the second intention of the demiurge, can occur to whoever dares to penetrate into the secret of Maya without counting on the strategic principles necessary to counteract it. For example, the principle of the fence, the search for which is this section slips into. Summarizing, the secret of Maya tells us that, after a systematic reduction, every potential microcosm or lost Virya can be noted by the demiurge as a significant superconcept in the habitual context of a macrocosmic superlanguage. Such a context is, of course, the everyday world of the Virya. But the secret of Maya tells us more. On an extensive axis of the potential microcosm, analogous to the x-axis of a system, uncountable spaces of signification intersect. The habitual context gives significance to the microcosm in only one such space, i.e., in a superconcept. However, the potential microcosm simultaneously exists in all spaces of signification that intersect the x-axis. That is why, when the blood purity of the Virya produces the dissolution of the illusion of Maya, it is not improbable that the demiurge makes a last attempt to keep him within the confusion of the great deception. Then may occur the horrifying fact that the habitual context of the world is transformed according to the characteristic mode of some oblique and unknown space. The psychic structures are, thus, put to the test, subjected to the tremendous tension of noticing the cultural non-correspondence between the schemata of known entities and the concrete entities existing in the new context. The world becomes hallucinatory, without the animic subject being able to clearly distinguish where the imaginary ends and where the real begins. And before such a changing orb, faced with unstable entities, the design of which are unreasonably altered, the reason of the Virya usually proves impotent to establish the relationships that constitute its essential function. And without counting on the relationships of the entity and between entities, without the equilibrium of the ratio, madness would not be long in coming. Unless, of course, the awakened Virya has the graceful will and the sufficient knowledge of the archaemonic technique to strategically isolate himself from the demented context. That blew my mind when I read it, because I had been aware of and affected by the popular concept known as the Mandela effect, specifically with the Berenstain Bears, but also with other less commonly known ones. So that blew my mind when I read that. I was amazed to finally have an answer to that question. And that is what continues to impress me with the works of Nimrod de Rosario, is they seem to answer a lot of the questions that were unanswered from reading other occult books. That concludes today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for more.